with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this playoff matchup. This is the first playoff game in college football. This is the first one out of their the first matchup in their big 16 team format, and I will say this game was a little bit boring. This was also the first time that any college team has hosted a playoff game, because usually when in the old format these playoff games, they'd be held at neutral sites, because these playoff games would also count as bowl games individually. So they would be held at neutral sites. This is the first time where there is actual home field advantage in the postseason, and it went well for Notre Dame. Granted, both of these teams technically played at home because they're both based in Indiana, but obviously playing in Notre Dame Stadium is way different than playing in Indiana Stadium. I mean, the Fighting Irish, they have a huge legion of fans, and part of it is because of the religion that the school is associated with. So naturally, and this is not to really offend anyone, but this is sort of like the expectation, because, it's like Notre Dame, a lot of Catholics, they're going to look at Notre Dame and they're going to sort of understand and like get a sense of identity for rooting for this team. This has been a big reason why like the Fighting Irish get a lot of the viewership on college games, and they seem to almost always get nationally televised because they really know how to draw in money. And part of that is because of their name, and because we know Catholicism, it's a very popular religion. But aside from that, I mean, these guys and their home crowd, they're just absolutely unbelievable. They're so loud, they're so annoying. I recommend going to a Notre Dame game, like in Notre Dame. The environment is amazing. And the score for this game, the final score ended 27-17, but I guarantee you the game was way less competitive than what the scoreboard would want you to believe. A lot of Indiana scoring came in the third quarter, not in the third, excuse me, came in the fourth quarter, where it was essentially all said and done. Throughout the entirety of the game, Indiana did not score a single touchdown. And the only point that they really had to show for it in the entirety of the first three quarters was a field goal. And by then the game was basically over. And well, granted, I understand, like, there's a lot to the game that goes into it. But after the Fighting Irish scored their final touchdown to make the score 27-3, I immediately knew, I was like, okay, I mean, it's not going to end off as competitively as people would like. Like, the rest of the game was essentially going to be garbage time, because 27-3, only Tom Brady has ever come back from a deficit like that. And last time I checked, there was nobody on either Indiana team that could end up coming back from a lead or a deficit that big. And it wasn't really like, it's not like Notre Dame ever had this game in doubt. Now, I will say this, Notre Dame, the running back for Notre Dame, I'm actually going to go ahead and pull up his name real quick, but let's see. His name was Jeremiah Love. He ended up breaking the record for longest rushing touchdown in a college football game. He ended up breaking Ezekiel Elliott's record when Zeke did that for, I believe it was for Ohio State in the college football playoffs, like when it was a 14 format before. But this was the longest rushing touchdown in college football playoff history. And I mean, 98 yards all the way to the house for a touchdown. They were backed up all the way in their own end zone, and he just ripped it off. This happened in the first quarter, and it really seemed like Indiana was in an environment that they just did not know how to handle. And that was my expectation for Indiana going into the college football playoffs, because their schedule was relatively easy compared to the rest of the ranked teams in the college football playoffs. And they never really had to go up against anyone significant. And when they went up against Ohio State, it also wasn't really that much of a contest. Like, Ohio State just proved time and time again why they were the ranked team and why they were the better team than Indiana. And I would have much rather preferred that the University of Miami with Cam Ward would have would have been selected to be in the college football playoffs as opposed to Indiana, but that's neither here nor there. The college football committee probably ended up learning their lesson, but in the end, having an Indiana Bowl is also just as impactful. But the game was, again, more or less, it was a pretty boring game aside from the first quarter. After the first quarter, it was just, garbage time. I mean, both teams ended up throwing an interception in the first three drives. The Fighting Irish, they ended up starting out throwing an interception because the ball was batted out of a lineman's hand, and it ended up getting into the hands of a corner. And then after that, Indiana, they had the ball in the red zone, and then a costly turnover led to the 98-yard touchdown run that I said before. So this game, it was like, it started out like, it started out a little bit back and forth, like it would be a little close, but then once the rest of the game continued, it was never close. This game was never in doubt for the Fighting Irish, and I don't think Indiana is going to ever be this competent of a team. Like, or if they are going to be this competent of a team, I don't think they're ever going to get selected to be in the college football playoffs. It didn't look like they understood or that they were able to handle the environment. They first started out the game going 3-and-out, and then they weren't really able to do much after that. And maybe it was the home field advantage. Maybe it was the fact that this was the first big game that they've had to play aside from Ohio State. Like, I thought they would have learned a little bit by going up against Ohio State, like how to handle the pressure, especially playing in Ohio State. I mean, you think playing in Notre Dame is bad? Imagine playing in Ohio State, where those guys are even louder and the team is just that much better. I thought, and they made that game between Ohio State. It was okay, but it wasn't like this bad of a game like against Notre Dame, at least in my opinion. Now, the stats for Indiana, I will say the quarterback, he did throw a couple of touchdowns. There were garbage time touchdowns, but he ended the game with 215 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Again, take that with a little grain of salt because those touchdowns came in garbage time. And then the quarterback for the Fighting Irish didn't really play that much better, but again, when you have help from the rush like how they did in this game, where they ended up scoring 2 touchdowns on the ground, they did end up passing for a touchdown early in this game. But again, most of this game, I will say, was a little bit, it was a little lackluster. Like, here are the possessions. So Indiana started out with a 3-and-out. Then Notre Dame, they threw an interception. Then Indiana intercepts it right back. And then on one play came the 98-yard touchdown run. Then Indiana had to punt. Then Notre Dame scored another touchdown. Then Indiana had to punt. Then Notre Dame punted. Then Indiana took a field goal. Then Notre Dame answered that with a field goal. And that was the end of the first half. Then in the third quarter, the only point scored in that third quarter was a field goal from Notre Dame, excuse me. And then in the fourth quarter, Indiana ended up blocking a field goal. Then they had to punt it. And then Notre Dame scored a touchdown. And that was basically all she wrote. Then Indiana, they ended up getting the ball back. They scored a touchdown. And I believe they went and they did an onside kick, which was then recovered. And then Indiana scored another touchdown late in the game. But at that point, it was like there was nothing that they could have done. And there was no time left on the clock after that touchdown, and that ultimately ended up sealing the win for Notre Dame, because like they did end up getting the touchdown and they did end up going for the 2-point conversion, but it ended up failing. Unfortunate for them. And once that happened, Notre Dame ended up getting the ball back, and that sealed the win as they took a kneel. So it was like, it wasn't really that much of a competitive game, but it did have some exciting moments, that I will say. But that's all that I really have to talk about in this game. Again, not entirely sure if Indiana is ever going to get considered for the college football playoffs ever again. Because that's usually like the problem that we get. Like, whenever teams outside of the SEC or teams outside of the Big Ten, whenever they get put in these college football playoffs, and they get blown out, a lot of people, they say, okay, this is why we don't have these kinds of teams in the college football playoffs, because they just either they can't handle the pressure, or they haven't really had they haven't had to deal with an environment like that. But we'll see how the rest of the college football playoffs go. I mean, it's college football, so anything can happen in these games. But that's all that I really have to say. And now we're going to go ahead and go into the second segment where I talk about the NBA in-season tournament. The games have concluded, and we're going to go ahead and talk about the winner of the NBA Cup. And be sure to stay tuned for that after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign,